Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Pro Fluent Sports here with my man, Andy Sandler. Andy, appreciate you hopping on. Super excited for this conversation. We've had a lot of conversations around actually minor league club ownership recently, so fits the bill perfectly, and you're the perfect person to talk to about this.
Great. Happy to be here, Andrew.
So give us a quick rundown, right? You've done a lot of different things across real estate in the financial service world. What got you into sports ownership? Like, what was the shining moment where you were like, all right, the time's now. This seems like an interesting opportunity. What was your foray into the sports investment world?
Well, in 2018, after, I don't know, around 35 years practicing law and running advisory firms, I was ready to do something different. I started to view myself as a recovering lawyer. I played baseball until I was 50, running around the country playing senior amateur tournaments. Finally figured out at age 50 that my only way into pro ball was to buy a team. They weren't going to draft me. So went out looking for a team and started with the Kannapolis team. We loved it and we went from there.
So when you look at these assets, right, and give us actually, let me go back one step. Like, what's the portfolio today in sports? What's a little bit of background too, just about you guys as a whole? Like, what are you investing in? What gets you excited? I know you do a lot more other than just sports, but what's your philosophy on that side as well?
Yeah. So once I reduced my focus on law, I left my law firm, sold my advisory firm, formed Temerity Capital Partners, which is my family office. We're early stage fintech investors. We have a couple of operating companies in the technology space and financial services. I decided that my next adventure was going to be in sports, starting with baseball. And our business thesis was look for opportunities where we could do stadium adjacent real estate as well. And the concept was be involved in sports and community building and community development. So that's what got me, on this path.
Yeah, and I see you got the Aura ring on as well. Like, anything else in the sector you're looking at? Like, you're just following your passions now, or how do you think about investing? Like, do you think about it more financial? Do you think about it community based? Do you think about it, just because you love baseball and it's a good way to stay in it? What are the different, things that go into decisions? How are you breaking these down?
Yeah, great question. So what I concluded, and my sons and I, because we're a family office, we talk about this together, and they were very focused on impact, like that we should be shifting our investment focus to impact. And so that's what we do now. And so I view the sports portfolio as part of our impact portfolio because it's really about community development, going into tertiary cities, trying to help revitalize the core by building around a baseball experience. That was the start. More recently, we've segued into women's sports in addition. So on the baseball side, we had the Kannapolis Cannon Ballers, and then I got a call in 21 from a group in Greensboro. They were community people, local business people. They built the stadium so that Greensboro maintained its baseball team. And they were now all in their late 70s, ready to go. They called me, said, hey, would you take this on? I did. It's been a good experience. And then more recently in 24, the Lexington Legends had been taken out of the Major League system in the contraction in 2020. They were now playing in the Atlantic League, struggling. I got a call, would we think about taking that on? We looked at it again. That's another privately owned stadium with a lot of development opportunities, and we decided to do that. So we're owner operators of those three teams. In September, I had the opportunity, along with some professional colleagues, to be part of the new ownership group for the Tampa Bay Rays. So that's our recent foray. That's a little different than being an owner operator because we have a small piece of a very large investment there. But again, if this deal gets done in Tampa, there's going to be a lot of real estate development around it. So continuing the thesis. And then most recently, I am collaborating with Prospector Baseball, which is an Arctos KKR-backed fund, which is looking to buy multiple minor league teams. And I'm a senior advisor and small investor there. Was very involved in our first three transactions there, which was Jacksonville, Akron, and Lancaster in the Atlantic League. So right now we're kind of involved in a portfolio: Tampa Bay, Major League; Jacksonville, AAA; Akron, AA; Greensboro, High A; Kannapolis A; and two Atlantic League teams, Lexington and Lancaster.
Yeah, and round it out on the women's sports side too. Give some
Yeah.
context about investment as well, and then I'll tie it to the next question.
Yeah. So that one's pretty interesting. So I've been looking at women's sports opportunities for a while, and we were looking, and my wife came to me one day. She's a managing partner of our law firm, and she said, I think you're having more fun with the sports than I'm having practicing law and running a law firm. Think we should do women's sports. So I said, okay, sounds good to me. And she's pretty tenacious, and within a very short period of time, I found that we were the owners of the Columbus Fury in Major League Volleyball, and really excited about that because the real, yes, we like economics. We don't do it for economics. We just like being the owner operator. Again, like engaging with communities, bringing something to the communities. But I think the women's volleyball is unique because we kind of missed our opportunity in NWSL. We kind of missed our opportunity in WNBA when we first years ago looked at teams. They were in the 30 million to 50 million range. Now both leagues are well over 200 million. And so, what's the next opportunity in women's sports, and where there's really going to be an opportunity for almost early stage tech-like returns. And that's the sports that are really just getting going. And more girls play volleyball than any other sport. And so we really think that's the opportunity. There are two or three competing leagues right now. That's all going to have to sort out. But I think this is going to be a really unique opportunity. And I don't know if you ever watched women's professional volleyball, but it's an amazing experience to watch those games. The level of play, the quality of the athletes, the teamwork. It's really, I think, unique in the sports experience.
Yeah, I've seen it live, not pro live, but I've seen college live, high school live. Obviously, the Olympics is exciting. So it's cool to see some of the Olympic sports start to build the leagues
Yeah.
around them, like you had mentioned. You talked about a little bit before prospector baseball, and this goes into a sort of larger conversation we've been having lately. As you look at minor league clubs historically owned, call them mom and pop shops, right? Owned by
Yeah.
families around the community. Well, now you have Prospector coming in through Arctos. You have Avenues Capital with Mark Lazary and their group On Deck Partners. So we had Mike, the CEO, there on the podcast last week. They
Good
own a few
man,
clubs
Mike.
now.
He's a good man.
Yeah, and then you obviously have Diamond Baseball Holdings that's been around the longest, and I think they're up to like 48 or 50 clubs now. How do you see sort of this transition of sports changing hands from families to, and again, some of those are minority stakes, they're not full, right? But some are majority, some are full buyouts into more, institutionalization. How are you viewing that? How are you thinking about it? Pros, cons? Just curious, sort of your thoughts sitting now on both sides of it.
Yeah. Well, I am nostalgic for the mom and pop operator days.
Mhm.
I mean, before Diamond Baseball came in, and they're capped at 50 teams, and they're pretty close to that. And then later Prospector and On Deck. And then there's a Texas Rangers group, Ram, that's out there buying some teams. I think with three teams, we were kind of, as a family business, one of maybe only three or four families with multiple teams, maybe five. So, I love that model. I think that's a great model for communities, but the world has changed, right? Institutional capital is moving, has found this niche. To play at the major league level, you're talking about billions and billions of dollars to buy and control teams. And these groups have decided that there's real opportunities in minor league baseball. So I was not enthusiastic about this development. But, having gotten to know the Prospector guys really well, and I find that their approach is not dissimilar from my approach in terms of really being focused on community building. So, it's the new reality.
Yeah, right. It's It is what it is. So play the cards as they're dealt, right? But how do you think about, you brought up community now a few times, right? And everyone has different ideas of what it is, of how you build it, of how you sustain it. In your mind, like what do you, when you say the word community, community building, like what does that entail? How does you guys as a family office think about that? How do you define it as well when talking about community?
So I'll use Kannapolis as an example. So Kannapolis was, is an old mill town. When the Fieldcrest Cannon Mill shut down, the team, the city really almost went dark. There was just nothing there. The mayor, the city council, the community decided to reignite and try to rebuild their city around putting $50+ million into a sports and entertainment venue, the stadium, which they built on the old mill property. And there was a problem with ownership of that team. They came to me, asked me to take it over, sign the lease, operate the stadium. And, in my former life, I'd have appreciative CEOs and their families when I got them out of trouble with the government or got companies out of trouble with the government. That's what I mostly did. And that was, satisfying, right? But in my entire, professional career, nothing is more satisfying than when somebody walks up to me at the stadium and says, "Thank you for what you've done in bringing our town back to life." Okay. Now, of course, I didn't do that. I was one player and in a bigger effort to do that, right? But that is just so satisfying to just watch this city almost rising, from the ashes and to be a very vibrant place now is just awesome. Obviously Greensboro, Lexington, these are really well established communities, but we are anchoring parts of town that are just outside the core downtown and helping to expand that entertainment corridor by the things that we're doing. And that's just really exciting and really fun. And I hope we're gonna, our larger group is going to accomplish the same thing in Tampa. And I know that Prospector is really focused on that, with respect to the teams that it's bought, which is what attracted me to partner with them.
Yeah, and this goes a little tangential, but I'm curious how you think about this. But anyway, like my grandpa always talked about Wall Street and Main Street, right? And like the true intel's on Main Street. What else do you also learn, or are you able to apply? Like I'm sure going into these, let's just call it smaller towns, you actually get a feel for the state of the economy, for the state of how people are thinking, whether it's politically or socially or whatever it is. Like, what's the pulse on the ground these days? I'm just curious, like, how what you're hearing, but then also number two, like, is that advantage, an advantage to everything else you're doing of sort of having both perspectives while you're, in these cities and seeing what's really happening in communities across the country?
It's interesting you use the Wall Street, Main Street analogy. Having spent 22 years at Skadden Arps, which at the time was the second biggest law firm at the world, which was very Wall Street, right? I spent a big part of my career on Wall Street. And, that had it was good in its way. But I tell you, now I'm a Main Street guy and I just dig it much more. Just, being down in the community, heck, I'm at a baseball stadium now. And, if there's a line at the beer stand, I go behind the counter and start slugging beers. If my guys aren't getting the onions and peppers ready for the sandwiches and the way I want them to do, I go behind and start shoveling onions and peppers. I mean, there's just, I just enjoy the heck out of it. And again, to do that and then to see our buildings begin to go up around the stadiums. And we have a restaurant, the Towel City Tavern in Kannapolis, that's stadium adjacent.
Mhm.
We're about to start a hotel. It's just community it's just activating a community. It's just good for the soul.
Yeah, Sal, I mean, I can see you light up talking about it. It's cool. Now talk to us a little bit about the real estate side, right? Obviously, correct me if I'm wrong, but like the sports team itself it's the IP, it's the thing where people belong and gather around, but like from an economic perspective, it's probably actually potentially, I mean, without it, there's nothing, but it's kind of the least valuable, right? It's the things around it that start to make this, train move. How do you guys think about that? How do you decide a restaurant or a hotel, or hey,
Yeah.
what else are we going to put at the stadium? Is it concerts? Is it weddings? Or
Yeah.
how are you starting to think about everything around, that core asset, which I think is the greatest part of sports. It's a great,
Well, let me just disagree with you a little bit because I
please.
think the team playing 63 home games and the teams employing lots of people in these communities on game days is actually a really, really important part of it. And the community spirit, right? It's something for people to, if you think about it, right? I'm sure I'm sure an NFL fan, an NBA fan, an MLB fan, right? And in businesses all over the country, you stand around the water cooler talking about the football game on Sunday. Certainly in Washington, D.C., where I live in Alexandria, Virginia, right? Everybody talked Redskins for years and years and years every Monday morning. Now the Commanders. But in these smaller communities, right, they get to do that too with their own teams. And that is really meaningful. So the team adds a lot. Now, as you noted, right, economic activity, when you have, when we build multifamily, more people live and play downtown. That helps all the small businesses in the community, creates yet additional employment opportunities. So that is just as important, but not more important than the team aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, without the team, it's nothing, right? Yeah, it's super interesting. So as you look through that, what do you find like from a community building, like outside, right? 63 home games, that's a lot of days, call it 300 plus just sitting there. How do you guys think about utilizing it beyond just, baseball?
Well, so this is really interesting, right? One of the reasons we came into minor league baseball, and we talked about at the time that we came in, it was really mom and pop. A lot of teams, a lot of ownership groups, were the local lumberyard guy, the local car dealer who were doing this for their community. And they weren't thinking about the fact that they had this incredible physical asset, a stadium, right, that was sitting there 365 days a year, not just the 60, 63, 65 days that the team was playing. And that was one of the things we focused on first. So, for example, we've had the Savannah Bananas in Kannapolis and Greensboro. We've got them 3 nights in Lexington in September. We're so excited about that. We bring in concerts, we play preseason college tournaments. We do one of the things that I love because I was a D3 guy. We have a D3 tournament every year that we play in both Kannapolis and Greensboro. We let high school, really top high school programs use our field on occasion. In Lexington, Transylvania University plays all their home games and does on our field in Lexington. So we do all kinds of things, some involving baseball, some involving other things. We had the National Kennel Show in Kannapolis, which was televised on ESPN. Right, our sponsors got 10 million eyeballs by people watching the dogs running around the field catching frisbees, right? I mean, that was great thing for the community, great visibility, great for our sponsors. So we're just thinking about what can we do to get people into the stadium and eyeballs into the stadium. In Kannapolis, by the way, when the stadium was built and we agreed to be the operator, it was the city asked us, are you okay with this being a public park where the community can walk around the stadium, do fitness walks, walk their dogs, use the playground? We built a splash pad, use all of that when the team's not playing. So absolutely, because we want maximum traffic in the stadium. It's a very expensive asset that should be well used. So those are the kinds of things that these institutional investors are very focused on, but maybe historically the mom and pop owners didn't spend a lot of time on.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we say is of sort of around the edges of sports. It's going to create a lot of good picks and shovels plays as well, which kind of leads into the next question. How are you guys? I mean, again, like I'm gonna view you guys. You guys are no different, at least to date, as a family, from the on decks and prospectors and Diamond Baseball Holdings, right? Like you're leveraging you have multiple clubs, right? You're a multi-club owner as well. How do you think about shared services? How do you think about integrating technology? Like, what are you guys doing on the back end of things as well? Like, we talked a lot about front end, but I'm curious now back end.
Yeah, we're doing a lot. We are really, again, our family, we're technology company owners, right? So while some would describe me personally as a Luddite, and you might even agree with that, given our difficulty in putting this together on the screen, our business is very technology forward and very technology focused. So yeah, we're looking at all those things. We brought in consultants and others to help us. How do we analyze our fan base? How do we not, bomb everybody's emails, but yet get them information that they'll find relevant about things we're doing at the stadium by micro targeting. For example, if you want to sell tickets to minor league baseball games, you probably should know that 55 of all tickets sold to minor league games are sold to mothers who are buying tickets for their families. Okay. Women are a really important part of the fan base. What's the most frustrating thing for women when they go to a ball game? Why are they standing on long lines in the bathroom when men are in and out? We did a time motion study to figure out how the placement of sinks and mirrors in the ladies' room could make the traffic go much more quickly. And you got to make, so it's little things like that. It's a very retail consumer business, which again, having been in the corporate world for most of my career, I'm enjoying the heck out of.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of, especially when you're deep in it like you guys, just a lot of little things like constantly trying to improve and how do you make it better. And, there's the hospitality aspect to it. I'm sure it's just a fun challenge in general for you and your family of just trying to figure out things to improve, which is, like the creative. I think it's Spielberg always talks about the most powerful force in the universe is creative energy, right? And it's like, wow, you get to really go create a lot of things around it.
Yeah, and again, shifting back to the women's side, there's all these interesting things about minor league baseball, but now learning about indoor sport, right? We play at Nationwide Arena in Columbus, Ohio, and learning about how to put on the right show inside in the winter in that context, create enthusiasm around women's sports, the player relationships are different. The relationship between ownership and the players is different. It's really just that's been a fascinating experience. And I think my wife Andrea and I, we want to do, we got to get this one right. Again, we kind of had I guess I've had a reputation over the years as kind of this patron saint of lost causes, in the sense that we've taken, both in Kannapolis and Lexington, we took over failing teams and rebuilt them. Well, the Columbus Fury was really, even though they had the third best attendance in Major League Volleyball, was really struggling on the business side. And so we're really focused on bringing that up and bringing that, and making that better. But we have our eyes out on other things in women's sports. Softball. I think what they're doing with women's professional softball. Have had many conversations with them. Can't wait to find the right time and place for us to have a team there. A lot of these leagues, it's interesting, they're centralized. USL, is basically operated at a centralized basis. Right now, the softball is. The other volleyball league, Love, is operated on a centralized basis. My DNA is to be an owner operator. I've never wanted to own a piece of a league. I want to own teams, right? And operate the teams in the specific communities. And if you look at all of the major sports, when the league exists for the purpose of enhancing the ability of the teams to do their business, right? Those are the healthiest situations. And that's what we're really, really focused on.
Yeah, and I want to go a little bit deeper on that, just in the different, there's pros and cons, right, to how the league structures are set up. Now with more entrance of private capital, right? It seems to be there's more centralized leagues because the league wants to create the value and ultimately, raise and build and scale faster and then ultimately sell it off. But traditionally, and that's partly a time-based thing, right? They want to do a little bit faster. Compared to these things that, minor league baseball has been around for 100 years. Most of the pro leagues we all love today took long, long time to get going. How do you think about that then, right? Like you're now coming into some of these centralized leagues that are trying to build and grow faster versus, the things that, like you said, are more like a franchise basis. Like how are you viewing pros and cons or, whether just high level, how do you think about it?
Oh, look, you know, can the economics of the centralized leagues work better for the ownership of those leagues? Probably. Is the centralized league operating for the benefit of the league the best thing for the communities where the team plays? I'm not sure that's the case. And, I think, right, it's a competitive business. There are going to be different leagues with different structures. Again, we focus on impact investing, right? We are a buy and hold family. We're not looking for our exit, right? And so I just have a really strong preference for the value prop as an impact investor buying and operating teams and communities. That doesn't mean from an economic perspective the other isn't a strong business initiative. It's just not what we choose to. That's just not the way we choose to invest, our hard-earned coin or put our scarce resource, our time into it.
Yeah, and it begs something else, and I would say it to their face too, but like we own, roughly 5% of a USL team, and
Which one?
Westchester SC.
Okay, yeah. Well, in our Tampa deal, the ownership group of the Rays owns the Rowdies. Yeah, so I guess we own part of a USL team as well.
Yeah. But it's, can be frustrating, especially for a lot of the other owners. I'm not a principal owner. We own a small minority stake, right? But when the USL League deal, the media rights revenue doesn't even flow to teams. And then the family that owns it then goes and raise private equity money on the league level and cashes out, 9 figures themselves. And everyone else is like, oh, just go run your team. But there's no support. They're sort of milking all of the juice, right? It should be going to teams. It should be like, this should be all the effort to help the people actually building your league, right? And building the franchises. Without the franchises, there's no league. So anyway, I can see both sides of it. Again, like if I'm their USL headquarters are here in Tampa, and a lot of people have been there and then also been there and left there, and so sort of know all the different sides of it. But I think that's frustrating a little bit for team owners like yourself that put blood, sweat, and tears and a lot of their own capital and money and time and energy and resources and network, and sort of the league is extracting a lot of the value that's obviously being created by the team. So anyway, like it's a good discussion to have.
Yeah. I mean, look, my comment on that is, that's their model. They are transparent about their model.
Correct.
They're doing very well with their model. That's not a model that's of any interest to me. I've been approached many times about buying a team in that league, and I have no interest in doing it. Not because I don't think it could be economically successful, but it's not the operating model that I want to be associated with.
Yeah, and as you come into teams, right, you talk about a lot like where you guys have sort of, I don't know, we'll call your sweet spot, but turn around things, even if there's things going well. As you're coming in, what is first week, first month, first year, like what's sort of the playbook now that you have in mind to come in and start to, I'm sure there's like an evaluation, and then they're starting to implement, and then there's changes, and then now it's gravy on top. Like, how do you think about it? What's your process look like now?
Yeah, well, again, there have been times in my career where I've had over 1,000 employees working in my various companies, right? And it's all about people. It's about the quality of your leadership, and it's about the culture that you build. So first thing I do when I come in is I look at what am I inheriting and what's the culture like, and make decisions about whether to keep building or to make changes. So for example, often because we do turnarounds, we come in and we change everything out. I am fortunate to have a great group of senior executives at Temerity Baseball, which sits on top of all of our baseball investments, that comes in and, and can help bring in local leadership for the teams and fix things. But, what's also important to know, and sometimes new owners don't do this, is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So, for example, unlike Kannapolis and Lexington, which are complete turnarounds, we get to Greensboro. It was Greensboro Grasshoppers, an iconic minor league franchise, have done well in the community forever, had really good leadership, a good culture, a pipeline of executives coming up through the system who'd been there for a long time. The way we did Greensburg was stay out of their way, right? We can help in the margins. We can help modernize things, new thoughts, new ideas. But for the most part, it was about continuity.
Yeah.
So you got to start with the people, and you got the people you have, if they're the right people, or you got to get the right people in place.
Yeah, it's I'd love to sit on the other side and see I'm always fascinated by things like that. My grandpa and my dad both sort of did similar things with the businesses they bought and then sort of built for 30 years. And I always find it quite fascinating. It's cool when it's not just built from scratch, right? Like everyone gets enamored with build the next great thing. It's really interesting when there's things like, hey, they're already sort of there, but there's a ton of optimization to be had now.
And what I found is, right after spending, 35 years, in the court, in and around courtrooms and lawyering and litigating and, negotiating consent decrees with the government, I figured out in my early 50s, hey, I'm actually a business builder. That's what I like to do. And so that's what I've been doing for the last, well, I won't say how many age, because then you'll know just how dead ancient I am, but for a lot of years.
Yeah, I often find that people that have been on the legal side, they sometimes become risk adverse, but if they don't have that tendency, they're not as risk adverse. They become some of the best business people because they get all their learnings and they know both sides. They know how to structure it. Like they sort of have the full gambit. I've found that to be true.
That is a very astute observation. 95% of lawyers, generally really smart people, very risk adverse with very limited business acumen. But you take the 5% of lawyers who have that experience and have those other skill sets and translate them into business building, they tend to be often very successful.
Yeah, all the people I know.
As long as they can squeeze that lawyer arrogance out of their systems.
Of course. Andy, I'll hit you with a few rapid fire questions at the end. But one question we like to ask everyone, and I know we've touched on a bunch of different things, so you can take it wherever you want with this, but what's one trend that you've been keeping a close eye on in the industry and speaking here to sports, which can go in a bunch of different directions, that you think other people should have an eye on, or, they're not paying a close enough attention to, just across the space?
The explosive growth of women's professional sports. I think, if you're somebody who's getting into sports investing now, I would zero in on women's sports. That's where, you read all these stories about the Rooney family and the Mara family, right? Who got into the NFL or got into Major League Baseball or the NBA, as a family 30, 40 years ago, and are now sitting on assets valued in the billions, right? Steinbrenner family, in the mid 70s, bought the Yankees from CBS for a song, while in an investment like the Tampa Bay Rays, there's still enormous upside.
Yeah.
The magnitude of the upside, the multiples that can be achieved over a period of time, women's sports is going to be where the action is.
I like it. So I think that as we head to rapid fire before closing this out, first one was most underrated sports asset. I think you'd say women's sports there.
I would go further. I would say women's volleyball. Because again, how do you know what the most important sport is going to be in 10, 15 years? What are kids playing today?
Right.
So families are traveling around going to girls volleyball tournaments, right? More than anything else they're doing. That is, I really think that is, a particularly strong future.
Yeah, and talking to a lot of the youth sports club roll-ups, they've all spent a lot of time and effort in volleyball, and so most of them say the same thing. You can take a pass on this one if you want, but most overrated sports asset, or we'll just call it the one that you're the least interested in.
Well, I would say corporate owned soccer leagues.
I like it. One city you'd love to own a team in.
I would really, and I've tried really hard, and I may be announcing something in the reasonably near term, right? I've spent the last 40 years living in Washington, D.C. and its environs.
Yeah.
I now live in Northern Virginia and Alexandria. I would love to have a team where I where I get out of my own bed in the morning, jump in my car, and drive over to the ballpark. So that is an as of yet unrealized goal. So if anybody out there's got a DC area, good opportunity for me, come talk to me, because that's what's missing in our portfolio.
Yeah, I was gonna say I thought you'd stick close to home on that one. And this could be in any asset class, but and I don't know if you even have this data, but what's the best investment you've ever made?
In sports?
Just in general, it could be anything.
Gosh, well, we've had great success and been fortunate in building a couple of really good financial services technology companies, a couple of which we've had some nice exits, which has enabled me to do all of the other things we do. So, those have probably been our biggest economic returns. Our biggest,
Yep.
I would say my biggest psychic return, which is important, right?
Yeah.
Is what we've been doing in minor league baseball. And I have to say now, I am so digging. My wife and I are partners in a law firm, but now being partners in this volleyball team, I am just getting the biggest thrill out of that. And, I come home now, I walk into because obviously these days everybody works at home, right?
Mm-hmm.
I walk into the room and there's my wife on the phone with a Serbian agent negotiating a player contract, right? Now she's a kick-ass professional lawyer, right? But this is totally brand new to her, and she's like a fish in water. So that's been a lot of fun for me. And of course, getting to work, getting to take my grandson to a ballpark, right? And let him think that, and have him say, my team, right? That's pretty cool too.
Very cool. Biggest investing mistake that taught you the most?
I've made so many terrible investment decisions over the years. Entrepreneurs, right? You win some. If you're not losing sometimes, you're probably not taking enough risk. So I would say there's a theme to my business failures, and that is focusing so much on a great idea and not focusing enough on the poor leadership in the particular company that made realizing that opportunity in that particular business realistic. So I would say that's been my biggest mistake. And the other thing is, as an investor, hubris brings us all down, right? Just because you do something really well one time doesn't mean you have a golden touch. You got to do the hard work in underwriting and thinking through every investment, or you're going to get your butt kicked.
Yeah, so people is the key theme in a lot of today's conversation. But rounding this out on the rapid fire side, what's one book that you think everyone should read?
One book everybody should read. Well, I will use the book To Kill a Mockingbird because of all the life lessons there. And in fact, my family office, Temerity Capital Partners, is named for a phrase in that book. I don't know if you know the story, but Atticus Finch is in the courtroom representing young Tom, who's accused of all kinds of things, right? And Atticus Finch says to the jury, the only reason young Tom is here before you today is because he had the unmitigated temerity to befriend a white woman. So I just think there are lots of good lessons in that book.
That's really cool. I always am curious, and it was going to be kind of the next question of when you hear how people name their companies, where it comes from. So it's cool to see your book is tied to also the naming of the capital arm.
Well, also it wasn't really, you can't really name an investment firm, balls, right? And temerity is a synonym for balls.
Yeah, that works as well.
Oh, one thing we haven't talked about, one of the other really fun things we've done is we have our own beer, Baller Beer. And when our mascot in Kannapolis, Boomer Baller, is on the can, so that's been fun as well.
Yeah, the minor league baseball system has the best, team nicknames I think of any league. I mean, it's there's so many good ones. I wish like major league teams would be a little bit more creative. It's like the same common animals. You actually get some interesting things in the minor leagues.
Well, it's interesting because as a traditionalist, right? I found this aspect of getting into sport really interesting, right? So, for example, when we bought the team in Kannapolis, it was the Intimidators because that was Dale Earnhardt Sr. had owned the team before us, and because his widow owned the trademark, we had to do something different. So the process of coming up with the name Cannon Ballers was, right. I mean, I'm a lawyer, right? Now all of a sudden I'm talking about how am I going to brand a minor league baseball team? So, you just get into all of these things you just never think about. But check out Boomer Baller and the Cannon Ballers because we try to preserve the Kannapolis, racing industry legacy and Dale's legacy in town, while still appealing to those who were attached to the Cannon family and what they'd done for the community. That was a really interesting experience.
It's really cool. Well, as we round it out, that's good timing. We'll have everyone check that out. Where else should people go? What websites or LinkedIn or where can people sort of get the best breadth of what you guys are doing and stay up to date as you continue to do more things in the space, especially it sounds like women's sports.
Yeah, well, we kind of do generally our Temerity Capital Partners website is pretty transparent about what we do, but our women's sports business is going to be Artemis Sports Group, and Artemis is the Greek goddess of the hunt, and we're gonna stay tuned for what we're gonna be doing in women's sports, and you can find it there. And my biggest tip for people out there: go watch a college women's volleyball game or a professional women's volleyball game because it is just a blast to watch these amazing athletes and the teamwork involved in every point and the way they move around the court. It's just really a phenomenal thing. And who knew? I knew nothing about it until we got into this.
That's awesome. Yeah, sports is a really cool place to be. So we appreciate having families like yourself, investing and operating in it and making it better. So anyway, Andy, appreciate you coming on today. It's been a great conversation, tons of great insights. So again, thankful for your time and what you're doing for the space.
Andrew, and really enjoyed spending this time with you as I have our previous conversations. So best of luck going forward.
Thank you.